Ooh, baby, you're listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I head back into the bike world and talk with Casey Brown. And while Casey travels around the world in search of gnarly terrain and great dirt these days, her story is one that is pretty unbelievable, and it's almost a miracle that things worked out this well for Casey. I'm not going to spoil any of the podcast, but I will say that Casey's upbringing was harder than anyone else's that I've had on the show, but it's the kind of hard where Casey didn't even realize her childhood was that crazy when she was in it. And we talk about more than just her childhood on the podcast. We also hit mountain biking, skiing, and more. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, tell your friends about the podcast, and support my awesome sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Evo, Spy, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's head to Casey Browntown. So we're getting this thing done, and I know we were going to do it last week. We might have been trying to do it the week before, but your life is absolutely crazy, I would think, at this point. While you might have some time this week, what does your year look like? Being a professional mountain biker who's in demand all the time, do you have any time to yourself, or is it constantly on the road?
I mean, I try and take time for myself in November. That's kind of the month for most mountain bikers where we get to just decompress. But yeah, my year is pretty hectic. I started out the year going to Hawaii for filming Return to Earth for 3 weeks. And then after that, I was home for 2 weeks. And then I had to go to Argentina for 2.5 weeks in February. And then back home again for less than 2 weeks. And then it was New Zealand for Crankworx. And then, back home after that for another 2 weeks. And then I had to go to Bhutan for another film project. So, massive year so far. And then after Bhutan, I was home for 24 hours. Went to the UK for another film project. Back home for 24 hours, and then I had to go to California for Trek for a new bike release. So, yeah, it's been pretty hectic. This year's probably the busiest winter I've had so far.
Yeah, it sounds pretty crazy, and being that you're a human being, there are other things in your life than biking and work, and I would think that there are weddings, there are different things that you just have to miss because of your job.
Yeah, I don't go to weddings. My summer's booked, so yeah, weddings are non-existent. I have a dog, so I try and make as much time for her as possible. She's 10 years old now, so yeah, she still shreds, but yeah, it's my sister helps out a ton with taking care of her, and I have friends and stuff that also love taking care of her, so I'm pretty lucky in that way. Got a good support network for the dog. Yeah, I got busy life, and then between it all, I love hanging out with my family and stuff, so making time for them is super important for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that there's no end to it, but it's what you love to do. And time is something that you probably had a ton of when you were growing up, because you grew up in a place called Byron Bay, New Zealand, and this is a place that most New Zealanders don't know about. So how does your family even end up there?
Well, my dad was adventuring the world and met my mom in New Zealand, and they got together, and my dad's idea of a career was being a commercial cray fisherman in a remote corner of the earth, the last frontier of New Zealand. So they moved out to the edge of Mount Aspiring National Park, and they had a piece of lease land there, and my dad built a house right on the river, right on the ocean, and he fished this really dangerous part of the Tasman Sea for years and years and years with a boat that he made by himself. He's a aluminum fabricator, so he built this boat, and he fished the sea there and brought home always amazing food from the ocean. So we'd be eating crayfish a lot of the time, which is like a lobster without the claws, octopus, shark, whatever my dad would pull up kind of thing we'd have on the dinner table. So I grew up there till I was 6 or 7. We were kind of back and forth at the end, but yeah. And then moved to a 316-acre farm inland, which my dad bought for a place for us to stay while he was delivering all the crayfish to the restaurants and people that were buying it.
When I was looking into your story, I assumed that maybe you were like an hour from school and there was 20 people in your class and you heard sheep and stuff, because I didn't know what Barn Bay was all about when I started looking into it. But it seems like it was more remote than that.
Yeah.
You guys were on an island, kind of.
Yeah, we're almost on an island, essentially, just because we're so far away from any kind of road. We had to hike into our house. Last time I went there, I hiked out and it took us 9 hours.
Whoa!
Yeah. Like, before it was a little bit quicker because the road and the trail were a bit better, but this time we had to go through the bush, and, man, crossing some of those rivers, I can't believe our family crossed those with small children. They're pretty hectic river crossings, and it would take us 6 or 7 hours. We had a canoe to cross one of the rivers, and we'd use our quad sometimes, like, to get some of the heavy groceries as far as we could get them, just because we had to take so many supplies in every time. Because we'd go to Civilization maybe 2 or 3 times a year to get necessities and essentials and stuff like that. So yeah, when we would come back, we'd have a pretty big, heavy load of supplies.
You're growing up without plumbing, I'm guessing.
We had a little bit of plumbing, like we had a tap, and then my dad was pretty handy. But before I was born, the river swelled up so bad one night it washed the first house away into the ocean.
Oh.
Well, my mom had a newborn baby, so they had to live in the back shed for a few months. And man, the climate there is pretty rough too, like high winds and heavy rain. Like one time it rained for 90 days straight.
I live in Seattle and we don't get anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy climate there. So my dad collected the pieces of house that he'd find on the beach and he rebuilt the new house. And it was actually pretty sweet. It's still there. It's a hunting cabin now. But we had a windmill for electricity. Yeah, it was usually pretty windy, so we'd always have enough for a few light bulbs and the fisherman's radio that we'd listen to hear the weather coming in and what was going on nearby. So we had a little bit of first world stuff, but when I look back on my childhood, it feels like I'm looking back into the 1940s or something, because of like walking around with candles and yeah, we're pretty rustic, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like it. And were you in Barn Bay because your dad didn't want to be in Canada anymore?
Yeah, I think because, he found his new life in New Zealand with my mom and had a family of 4 kids, and my mom had a kid before she met my dad, so 5 children, and, it was just like kind of a whole new world down there for him. I think he was pretty stoked on it.
So trouble didn't send him there?
I think his adventures sent him there over the years. Yeah, he traveled the world. He got out of Canada and just kept going, like went to Australia, and he just traveled the world for a really long time and ended up in New Zealand for a big chunk of that time.
And I'm guessing your childhood is all pretty much free range. You're in the woods. You're doing whatever you really want because there's nowhere for you to go. Do you have friends?
There was like a family that lived 6 miles down the beach.
Oh, just a hop, skip, and a 6-mile jump.
Yeah, so they would come by from time to time. That's the only other kids I kind of knew. And that would be pretty rare too, like we'd never really see them. But our house was in a location where people would come through, like people that were on real adventures, like going on mega hikes or mega tramps through the bush. They'd stumble upon our house as like a saving grace.
Place of refuge.
Yeah, they'd come in and they'd be like, oh my God, we're ready to give up on our life there. People would come through and just be totally destroyed from the weather and the bugs and the everything. So yeah, we had a lot of people come through from that kind of stuff, and that was our link to the outside world a lot of the time. Like, remember one time they brought white bread, and we'd never seen white bread before, and it was almost like candy, where just like a bunch of seagulls at this loaf of white bread.
It's insane.
Yeah, because it was so different from anything we'd eaten before. Like, pretty crazy stuff. And then, other people would bring in candy and be like, what is this? Like, we never seen anything like it before kind of thing. It was crazy.
Did you ever feel bad about your situation? Like, I wish I was a regular kid, or did you just not know and not care?
Not know and not care. Yeah, exactly. Would never been in civilization long enough to really, it was more of an alien world rather than something that we thought was possible for ourselves.
What happens when you get really sick or you break an arm? Because, I mean, you, based on what I see now, I'm sure you've always been a little bit of a daredevil. And when you are 9 hours from medical help, what happens in that kind of situation?
Well, again, my dad's pretty savvy. Like, he'd use dental floss and a needle if we needed stitches or anything like that.
So you can take pain, no painkillers back then?
Yeah, I don't think that was an option. I remember one time my brother dislocated his shoulder. This woman pulled him from the side of the boat a little too roughly, and he got his arm dislocated, so he was in quite a bit of pain then. But I don't remember ever going to the hospital except for when I was born. No, that was the time when the family would go to civilization, was when my mom was ready to have a kid or something. So
it's really exciting. Not only do we get to have another sibling, but we get to see people.
Well, I'm the last kid, so I never got that. But from what I've heard,
your reputation for never wearing shoes comes from growing up around no people or in a place where you probably don't have many pairs of shoes.
Yeah. And New Zealand is like that. Like, you don't wear shoes a lot of the time. Like, even nowadays, you go to a grocery store in New Zealand and half the people aren't wearing shoes in there.
Not in this country.
Yeah, it's just different. You don't wear shoes. There's no need. Like, it's not cold enough.
Yeah. And I've seen you running barefoot. I've seen you riding bikes barefoot. Have you had any major injuries to your feet that would have been prevented had you been wearing modern foot technology?
Probably. I mean, I've stood on some pretty gnarly stuff and definitely cut my feet up a few times, but that's never stopped me from continuing.
Have you ever worn those shoes that wrap each toe individually?
I have. They're quite funny. My auntie wears them, and I thought maybe I'll try them out, so I put them on. And if you're actually running pretty hard or like going for it, your feet just kind of slip out of those toe socks and end up in the main part of the shoe. So, yeah, I think I prefer just regular old feet.
Yeah, and I think if you look at yourself in the mirror wearing one of those, you're going to want to punch yourself in the face.
Exactly. It's true. Yeah, they look pretty goofy.
They do. I judge anybody that wears them.
Yeah, good. Keep doing that.
But like you said, eventually you moved inland, and it's not like you're getting a big house and plumbing, because it sounds like you move into a teepee right away before you build a big hut to live in.
Yeah. I mean, my dad, I feel like no matter where he goes, he builds teepees. It's like the first thing, like, all right, we don't have anything to live in, we'll build a teepee first kind of thing. So, yeah, we lived in a teepee for a while. I'm not sure how long, actually, but I remember we had this one stoat, which is like a ferret that used to come visit every night, and we named him, and he was just this animal that would come into our living room and kind of rummage through our things. So we weren't super blocked off from nature in that teepee.
And were you near civilization as well? Was it a culture shock thing where there was people all the time?
Yeah, we were. We were probably about 5 miles from the nearest paved road. But we didn't have electricity or anything. We had another windmill, like a wind turbine that would power this little battery bank that we had. And it wasn't as windy there, so we'd have to run out to the bank and see if there was enough wind to power certain things in the little hut that we ended up building. So I remember we had a little TV, and we'd have to wait till the wind was absolutely howling to watch TV. The 2 channels we had.
But that's like a huge treat compared to when you're on Barn Bay and you have nothing.
Yeah, it was just a different time. We went to school and stuff. I remember our whole family would just be super sick all the time because we didn't have any of the antibodies from being in civilization. We were battling like being in the real world, just germs and stuff from people.
What are you doing for fun? Have you started biking yet? Are you playing any sports once you get into like a civilized world?
Yeah, I guess so. Like, school was interesting because I wasn't very well socialized. So it was pretty hard to fit in at school, just being the kid that,
The mute in the corner?
yeah, the kid that doesn't like wear the nice popular clothes or knows anything about the popular things. You don't know, so you don't really fit in. It was super hard. I hated school so much.
Were you like the dirty girl?
I was. We pretty much still lived in the bush, so yeah, obviously we were like the kids that didn't have the nice clothes and stuff, so we were easy targets. School is mean.
Were there any sports or anything to help pull you out of that, though, or at least to give you some self-confidence?
I don't remember necessarily having any extra curricular sports or anything like that, but we had a horse, and my sister would ride the horse, and I'd clean the horse, and that was kind of our focus at home. And then one day my other sister decided to teach me how to bike. I think I was maybe 5. Yeah, she pushed this little bike all the way to the top of this big hill, our driveway. It wasn't a smooth driveway. It was very rough. She sat me up on that bike and gave me a push, and off I went. Speed wobbles and everything, all the way to the bottom. I remember that being pretty scary, and crashing and not wanting to do it again, and then getting made to do it again because I was the youngest and I had no choice.
Right. So that's happening, but then when you're on the farm, your parents do end up splitting up at one point. Your dad ends up taking off with your older brother and one of your sisters, and you end up staying with your mom and sister on the farm. Is that how that played out?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
And how tough is that? Because I would think you love your brother, you love your dad, you love your other sister, just like you love your mom and your sister too. But when they leave, there's no communication, I would think, because you guys are off the grid.
Yeah, it was tough. I remember we had one cell phone, like one of those old ones, and would talk once in a while, but it's not like you're splitting up and they're moving to a different street or a different neighborhood or a different even town. They're moving to Canada, which is, for me, it was, I didn't even realize that the world had different countries at that point. I was like, oh, okay, so there's other things other than New Zealand out there. So at 6 years old, yeah, my dad left with a couple of my siblings and moved across the world. We'd visit once in a while, like once every 1.5 years or something. We'd go and visit for a couple weeks in Canada, and that's when I found biking. Like when I was 6 years old, I went to Canada, and Garrett Bueller, his mom and my mom were good friends at that point. Like that was my mom's connection in Canada. So we'd go and stay with them, and they had this little bike track around their forested yard. So all us kids would just be rallying around that track all the time when we were visiting in Canada. So for me, Canada kind of started the biking thing for me, I guess.
Was it one of those things where when you had to leave Canada, it was like tears going back to New Zealand and you were like, I just want to stay, or were you psyched to go back?
Yeah, it was pretty sad because we would miss our family so much, and being split up from going from such a nucleus of a family to being so spread out across the planet. It was quite difficult going from that transition. I remember just being in New Zealand and always wanting to be with the rest of our, like, why couldn't we be back together kind of thing. It was pretty hard. But I didn't think like anything could have been different because it was just the way it was.
Yeah.
At that age, you're just like, oh, this is the way things are.
You're not going to make a huge impact on the outcome. They've already decided.
No. Yeah.
We're not at a very sunny part of the story now, and it gets worse because the farm ends up burning down, I believe. And when that happens, you guys are displaced. You have to move, I think, to a place called Iowa, or I don't even know how you say it. You pretty much have nothing and are, I think, living off the government, and that has to just be totally taxing on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, money was always a stress thing as a kid because we wouldn't have any of it, and my mom would always talk about it with us. So, yeah, we were always stressed on money. And then when the fire came through and took everything of ours, like, we had nothing left. We didn't have insurance or anything like that, so we literally were at the mercy of donations and whatever the community could give to us. So we ended up renting a house for a little bit for the winter. And I remember it being super cold winter in a house that wasn't very warm or anything like that. And that was like the first real house I lived in was that. It was like this cold square box. I was like 8 years old living in the first house. And then we moved to Hawea. My mom figured out how to get a house in Hawea, and we moved there, which is a beautiful lake town. And I think that's when things started looking up. It was like, okay, we found some good community. We found a good place to live. And I had a dog, and I was still allowed to keep my little lamb. I had a lamb that spring.
Okay.
So I kept that like in the middle of town. I had this lamb. Moved the horses there. It was a time when things were looking a little bit better, and I was in a good school, and I'd bike every day to school and found some good people to be around at that point. And my dad came and visited that year when I was 8 or 9 years old. At that point, my dad came back and visited me, and it was pretty cool. Haven't seen him in a long time.
Now it is time for me to take a quick sponsor break, and my first sponsor is Evo. And Evo is a store I've been shopping at since 2001. I've always gone there because the people who work there never act too cool. They're kind of the people that are stoked and genuinely want to help. They're like that in all of their stores. Denver, Portland, Whistler, and of course my Seattle store. Their website, evo.com, offers just as much information and all the brands, product, and service for your bike, skate, surf, camp, ski, or snowboard needs. They also offer free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and a no-hassle return policy. Evo was started by a good friend, professional skier Bryce Phillips, and they have supported me since day one. Please support them by buying everything you need for your adventures from Evo. My next sponsor is Stanley, another iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. And while we all know Stanley for creating that green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that, and a lot more these days. When my kid thinks of a Stanley, he's going to remember the beer pint that kept his dad's beer cold for 4 hours, or the classic legendary bottle that magically keeps hot chocolate hot for over 2 full days. But we should all be thinking about Stanley when we drink water. Their water bottles are the best in class, and they are the right choice for the environment. And now, you can save 30% on all products from Stanley when you head over to stanley-pmi.com, buy some stuff, and when you check out, enter the code POWEL, the number 30, and that's all one word, and you're done. Make a difference, save some money, and those are my sponsors, so now we will jump back into the podcast. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit, but I think you're around 11-ish, or it's like 2002, and you make the move to the States. And I say the States, I mean Canada.
Yeah.
And what is the reason behind the move? Because I think you and your sister leave your mom in New Zealand and go move with your dad, which is a pretty ballsy thing to do as an 11-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, originally I was supposed to go visit for 2 weeks to Canada, and things were good, but we were still pretty hungry. Like, we didn't have a whole lot of food or anything like that.
You're like a poor kid at this point.
Yeah, we're
I mean, it's not a nice word to throw around, but I mean, if you're thinking about food, that's kind of where I put that line.
Yeah, we're definitely hungry, and I don't know, we weren't doing great. Like, we would never have done super great, but like going to Canada for 2 weeks and getting food and clothes and stuff like that, and kind of like seeing, oh wow, life could be really good.
I picture you as a wildling.
Yeah. And then my stepmom made the offer to take me in, and my dad wanted me to stay as well. So we started those conversations, which were really difficult, and ended up staying in Canada. And then my sister came over a couple months later because she was in New Zealand.
That probably puts a strain, maybe at the time, on the relationship with your mom. But what's your relationship like today?
Yeah, it was definitely tough times because my mom obviously wanted to keep me and my sister in New Zealand and kind of continue. It was really tough. I mean, she was pretty devastated, and she couldn't come to Canada and stay there because she's a New Zealand citizen. And it was really, really difficult. I remember her coming over and wanting to take us all back, and it was just too hard. Like, there was no motivation on our side to go back to New Zealand.
That just sucks, I would think, being in the middle of that conversation.
Yeah, it was really difficult. But nowadays, she comes and visits every summer, and I go down every winter to see her and go to Crankworx and stuff. So we do see each other, and it's always good. And I feel like, yeah, the relationship is always getting better.
Well, hopefully she sees everything that you've done and realizes that it might not have happened in New Zealand. I mean, it could have, who knows? But going to Canada probably created some opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think that's where life starts getting fun, because we talked about some bad stuff. I'll talk about some more later. But you go to Revelstoke, and it's a small town of like 7,000 people at the time. I think it's probably like 12,000 people now. But
yeah,
that's a big city for you, I would think. Does it feel like a big city?
I mean, we moved to the Big Eddy, which is the other side of the river. So it was its own little community as it was. But yeah, Revelstoke was the biggest town I'd lived in up to that point. It was huge, and it was like a lot of people. There was more than one school, which is crazy.
It's normal for most people.
Yeah. So I started going to school there, and my dad built this bike for me. It was this chopper bike, so it had a big wheel on the front and a 24-inch wheel on the back. Had these stretched out forks on the front. And then he thought, oh, it's perfect for going downhill, right? Because it's got a big wheel on the front and a little wheel on the back and these big forks. So he'd take me on these mountain bike rides, but he'd make me push my bike up the hill, obviously. I wouldn't be able to pedal this thing because it was so horrific with its geometry.
Right.
So I'd be hauling this super heavy, crazy bike up the hill just to ride down the hill. And I remember one time, it was the last straw. I was dragging this bike sideways up this steep pitch of hill because I couldn't reach the handlebars pushing it up this hill because it was so steep.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the top, I was dragging my bike sideways, and my dad was like, "What are you doing?" So he went to Vancouver to the secondhand bike shop and got me a GT Avalanche, like a little hardtail mountain bike.
Your first real one?
My first real bike, and it had wheels the same size and front suspension, a RockShox Judy on the front.
Mm-hmm.
That made my days a lot easier, and I'd still say didn't want to go on these long bike rides with my dad, but he'd make me go. I think that was good for me at that age.
This is around what, like 2003 when you get your first bike?
Yeah, I was 12 at that point when I got that bike.
And then your brother, Sam, is full on into the mountain bike scene. I don't know if he has sponsors yet, but...
Yeah, he's got a Kona as a sponsor, but he's living in Nelson or Caslow, and he's building trails. And for me, I'd see him once in a while, but he was more of kind of a myth, legend kind of thing. But that would come by every couple months or something like that.
When he'd come by, was it just listening to his stories and riding with him as much as you could?
Yeah, exactly. Just like in awe of this god.
He's my blood.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was really into the New World Disorder movies at that age too, like watching those with my friends and stuff. That was always like, yeah, let's watch New World Disorder and then go build a trail or something like that. So at that age, it was, yeah, pretty exciting.
And when he's in those, that has to be even cooler watching that with your friends.
Yeah, in 2003, when New World Disorder 3 came out, yeah, I got my friends to come around and we all watched it because I got the DVD earlier than everyone else, so it was pretty exciting. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And is he also skiing and snowboarding? Because I think you do that as well.
Yeah, he was always good at that stuff, like all the sports. He would just pick up, I remember he picked up telemarking?
Yeah, I remember that.
He was just like good at it all of a sudden.
So much work.
Yeah. He had a brand new snowmobile and stuff, so he would always be sending it on whatever kind of thing was interesting him at that point.
So he's doing really well. Are you racing at this point, or are you just free riding in Revelstoke?
I was just kind of riding around with my brother's friends and people that rode at school and stuff. It wasn't until 2004. All I wanted for Christmas was a Kona Stinky, and I knew my brother was sponsored by Kona, and so I sold the GT Avalanche and got a bit of money from that, and then saved up money, and then everyone else pitched in, and I paid for half, and then they pitched in the other half for Christmas, and I got this downhill bike with front suspension and back suspension. And I would ride that thing to school every day in the winter because obviously I got it at Christmas time. So rode it to school every day no matter how much snow there was.
Speaking of snow, you were a pretty badass skier in your own right. I think you were a Canadian junior champion in 2007. Do you start skiing right when you get to Canada?
Well, I snowboarded a couple times in New Zealand just for school stuff. So I started on a snowboard and then quickly moved to skis because there was a freestyle team that was pretty interesting to me. So I joined that. I played hockey as well before that as well, like as soon as I got to Canada.
You're Canadian, you're supposed to.
Yeah, I played hockey and then quickly changed into a freestyle skier. I was competing at provincial level for a long time, and then I did nationals once in Quebec.
Are you talking like park and pipe, or what are you doing?
Moguls and big air.
Okay.
So I'd be doing dual moguls, single moguls, and then do the big jump competitions. I was BC junior champ at one point, but definitely not Canadian. That would be insane.
Okay.
I did that until I was 19 years old, and then the BC team wanted me to start training all year round, and I had to make a decision to go with my gut feeling that mountain biking would be a better choice for me.
Are you better at skiing or biking in the beginning?
Kind of equal at that point. Like, I'd probably spend just as much time on each sport. But mountain biking was definitely more interesting to me just because my brother was so into it.
Yeah. Well, stop talking about skiing. Well, actually, I'm going to ask one more question about skiing. What tricks were you throwing in your big air?
I would be the only one hitting the biggest jump doing a spread eagle.
Okay. Well, at least you're hitting the biggest jump.
But I was learning backflips and stuff in the water ramps, and like I would do 360s sometimes in big air, but it was always pretty scary doing that stuff. So it was pretty minimal with the tricks. It was more moguls and that stuff.
Okay. Now we'll get to biking and talk about biking a lot more. So
Yeah.
2006, you're 16. I don't know if you can drive at that point in Canada, but I don't know if you get a full invite to Crankworx to compete in everything, but you're in Crankworx and you compete that year. Are you intimidated at going to an event like that?
Yeah, I'd been watching it for a couple years at that point. I'd seen it and definitely sparked my interest. But the year that I competed, there was like Women's Works, which was this kind of freestyle, all-around test of mountain bike skills, which I thought was really cool at that point. So I remember one of the tests was on crabapple hits, and then there was like we're allowed into the boneyard to hit some of the features of the slopestyle course. And there's also like a gnarly downhill section that we had to do as well. It was kind of a very broad, and I really liked it because it was a test of everything.
Did you call a women's competition a broad competition? Just wondering if you said that.
That's pretty good. It's a good joke.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was a broad competition.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't even know where we were.
That was great. Perfect. Yeah, so I competed at that, and there was lots of more older women in it, I guess, at that point. Like, I was probably one of the younger girls hitting crabapple hits, and I remember doing a one-hander, and then I didn't think a whip was really a trick or anything, and then I'd throw a whip on the last jump that wasn't counted or judged. And I remember doing a whip on that jump and hearing like the crowd just go nuts. And I was like, what? People actually like that? So then that kind of was interesting too, like seeing people stoke on seeing a whip.
I think that was the 2008 Crankworx where you end up on the podium at that Women's Work. But was that a one-time event?
I think there was a couple years of Women's Works, but yeah, it didn't last long. I remember that. It was kind of one of those tests of, will this event, will it bring the crowds? And I don't know if it did, and I don't know if it was well organized enough to kind of bring the hype that it needed.
When you say it might not have been organized that well, it makes me think that, oh shit, we got to put something together for the girls. We're going to do this here. Hopefully we'll do it on Thursday and we'll slap it all together.
Yeah, I feel like early days in Crankworx, stuff like that was always an afterthought. There was last minute things that weren't as organized as it could have been as it is now, I guess. Yeah, it's a different event altogether now.
It's gotten very, very big over the years, and it is one of the best events in all of action sports. But you've been going to Crankworx for a few years. I'm assuming you've grown out of being the dirty kid and you're kind of getting more normal, maybe tomboyish, but more normal in high school?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wearing bike jerseys to school and stuff?
I was wearing boy clothes for sure.
There are some normal things that high school kids do. You didn't do any of the normal stuff that elementary school kids do, but did you do the homecoming or prom or have boyfriends and that kind of stuff in high school, or was it all about bikes and skiing?
Yeah, I did have a boyfriend in high school. He was older, so he wasn't in high school. He was a mountain biker too. He competed at Crankworx in the slope style, so that was also inspiring for me. But yeah, I had lots of friends in high school, like mostly guys, that were into mountain biking or skiing or snowboarding or whatever. It was like I was into hanging out with people that were into doing fun things. So yeah, those people ended up being dudes most of the time.
I'm guessing you probably didn't own many bottles of perfume or dresses at that point in life.
No, I remember my stepmom made me wear a dress to prom. I had to go to prom and I had to wear a dress. My experiences with dresses at that point were when I was a kid and my grandma would make me a dress or my mom would make me a dress and I would bawl my eyes out and just cry because it was like a trap. Because you couldn't do stuff in a dress. The dress was like a trap. You couldn't play. You couldn't climb fences. It was like prison. Dresses were equal to prison for a kid like me.
For a kid like you, when you get to the point of graduating high school, I mean, biking and skiing, you realize that you might have a future in either one. But biking, I wouldn't think pays the bills, nor skiing at any point when you graduate high school. So what do you have to do to make ends meet when you get through school?
I worked as a mountain bike coach for a long time, and skiing was an Olympic sport, so there's a lot more funding for skiing, and it was definitely one of the reasons why I considered it for so long. But mountain biking was always my gut feeling of where to go, and yeah, I did the coaching thing, and it was terrible for my mountain biking. I don't recommend it if you're trying to get better at biking, but it definitely was a good experience and helped me kind of find my way in the biking world a little bit. Yeah, not just race. And, I didn't really, moved to New Zealand at one point for 5 months, trying to, get better at biking. I just wanted to be a free rider. I didn't know about World Cup racing. I didn't know about how to do it and make money at it. I would just go and do the odd race and kind of do okay or get on the podium, but never really had any focus. I was kind of scatterbrained, ADD, didn't know how to make it work for myself.
And no one does. I mean, really, you had the luck of having a brother who was doing it, but there is no playbook of like, hey, you're an 18-year-old kid. Here's how you get sponsors. Here's your next step. It's like you have to figure a lot of that out unless you have a great team manager or a brother who's going to give you some advice.
Yeah.
A lot of those things are learn it yourself. Now it is time for my final set of sponsors, and I'm going to start with Spy Optic. Spy has spent the past 25 years innovating the sunglass game, but more importantly, they have spent 25 years making you look good. To celebrate this 25th anniversary, Spy is re-releasing the MC3, an ode to Jeremy McGrath's original MC sunglass. The new Dirty Mo 2 is a sick update to Dale Jr.'s original Dirty Mo, and the Scoop 2 celebrates Spy's OG Scoop sunglasses, which started it all. If you wear sunglasses and listen to this podcast, it's time to support me, save some money, and make yourself look good. What I want you to do is head on over to spyoptic.com, pick out some sunglasses, head on over to checkout, and you are going to save 20% by entering the code POWEL20, that's all one word and the number 20, and you'll save 20% off. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing my favorite Northwest beer since 2006. But over the years, and even before they sponsored my podcast, they've been one of my favorite beer brands because they do so much for action sports. They're the first beer to produce their own ski and snowboard movie. They support a team of A-list athletes. They throw an incredible series of events with their Hella Big Air. And they have signature beers that donate to important causes like Protect Our Winners. If all of that isn't cool enough, the people that work at 10 Barrel, They're all skiers, snowboarders, and bikers. You know, people that like to drink beer outside. Next time you're at the store, please buy some 10 Barrel and support the brand that really makes a difference in the sports we love. To find out more about the beer, the pubs, and everything 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Bringing up your brother, it's another part of the story that I don't want to bring up, but it's part of your life and I have to. You lose your brother in 2009, I believe, and I can't think of anything worse than losing a sibling, especially in the way that you grew up where you were forced to be close, especially in those young years. So first, I'm sorry about your loss. And second, when this happens at such an important age in your life, I mean, is it something that motivates you to just go fucking apeshit on your bike? Or is it something where you need like 8 months to just cry?
I mean, yeah, there was some tough times. I've took definitely a few months to just be with my family and be really close to my sisters and stuff like that. That was super important because we'd never experienced a loss like that in our lives. And we'd also been so separated for so long that we found a new value in family. And so we all moved in together right away. We're like, we need to be close to each other because we'd always taken advantage or like never taken advantage of being such a cool family. So we definitely took time and processed it. And then, yeah, that year, 2009, I was like, okay, now I need to be a professional mountain biker. Like, there's no option here because I need to follow in my brother's footsteps or like do something for him because I didn't know how to be close to him when he was gone. So that's the only way I kind of figured how I could get closer to someone who wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, is it one of those things where you're like almost asking yourself on the top of the line, like what line would Sam take here? And you're just taking the gnarlier line?
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely had a few injuries because I was in probably the wrong headspace to be doing that stuff as well. I broke my pelvis and then I busted my liver and ribs and stuff like that. So yeah, I had a few years of setbacks and those things were all good learning experiences too. Like I needed to learn about injury and things like that. So yeah.
Is it one of those things when the Sam situation happens after those months that you're able to get over it? And I always use this word because I lack a better word, but does it make your balls grow bigger almost because you don't even care anymore?
Yeah, I think that's why I got injured. A lot of it was because I didn't have the same maybe respect for myself as I should have and self-preservation. Like I was just kind of going for it without thinking.
Yeah, that's what that kind of headspace can cause.
Yeah.
But you get through the injuries that you have when you have that mentality. And then I will say 2012 is the year that I think allows you to become a mountain biker full time. You podium at the Canadian Championships. When you do that, do you get an automatic bid to the U.S. Championships?
Well, I did my first World Cup that year. I got onto this team that was a grassroots team, so it was pay to play. So I saved up all the money I could over winter and trained my ass off. Like I'd never done any gym training or anything like that before. So 2012, I was in the gym, saving my money to go and race a World Cup. So I raced enough BC Cup and Canada Cup the year before to have enough points to race in a World Cup. So went to this World Cup in Mont Saint Anne and got 6th in my first World Cup ever, which was apparently crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I was so stoked because I thought, okay, maybe I'll qualify. I don't know. Who knows what'll happen. So getting a good result there was super motivating. Then there was another race in the States. I got 7th. That was another World Cup. And then I went back to Mont Saint Anne for Canadian Nationals. And I won Canadian Nationals at Mont Saint Anne. And that was like insane. Like I'd never thought that my first year of racing.
You're a national champion?
Yeah, I'd be like, wow. So it was a pretty crazy breakout year for me.
And is that when all the sponsorship conversations really start going for you?
Yeah, that's when things started happening a bit easier for me. I mean, it was still quite hard because at that point, nobody's making any money. I'm still like paying to play and everything like that. But I got a free bike and things were looking up. It was awesome.
I've spoken to a lot of women and their experience in action sports. And I would say being a woman adds a layer to your career compared to your male peers. And I think that sucks, but it's true. And I would say it's mostly financially, but there's other situations too. I usually stay away from them on the podcast unless it comes up. But in the world of bike, are women treated the same as men?
When I was starting out, women were definitely not very valued in the sport.
They don't look as you as selling bikes?
No, they were just kind of existing in the sport and not really making huge leaps and bounds in sales or anything like that. So no one really paid women or anything like that. There was only like the top 3 that were really getting paid. But nowadays, and as years have gone by, in the last 3 years, I think there's been a huge change in that. Bike companies have finally seen that the women's sector is the fastest growing sector in mountain biking, and women are going to be the biggest thing selling the next chunk of bikes kind of thing. So there's been a whole lot more women getting paid, being sponsored, kind of opening it up for more and more women to get into the sport, because that's what happens is if there's more women getting paid, then there's more opportunities for the tier 2, tier 3 women as well.
Are you paid in terms of contracts? Do you think you make the same as your male counterparts that are on the same level as you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's pretty even now. I feel pretty fortunate to be in the position I am, especially because I don't have to go and race World Cup anymore, and I don't have to do things that don't feel natural to me. I can go and be a free rider and do filming and things like that and focus on things that I'm interested in rather than just race. So I feel very lucky that my sponsors trust me and let me do that stuff.
Well, it's cool because I speak to a lot of different sports, and the women that I speak to in every sport but bike so far, the prize money's different, the salaries are different, the opportunities are different, and there always needs to be a champion in those sports. I mean, we had Sarah Burke in skiing, in snowboarding right now I look at it as Anne-Fleur Marxer.
Yeah.
Do you even need that champion in bike, or do the bike brands and people in the sport just get it?
I mean, I think the United States is one of the countries. They love champions and they love people on the top of the podium. But I think a lot of other parts of the world are now seeing the value in just people pushing the edges of the sport that don't exist yet.
Oh, well, I meant more they were champions for equality in their sports. Does bike need a champion for equality, or is the bike world actually doing it all right?
I think the bike world's doing it all right because the biking industry is new enough, and I think that there's not a whole lot of people that are in the sport right now. Like, I remember the old racers and stuff, the people I used to race with back in 2012, the guys that were racing at that point, they were definitely womanizers and definitely did not have any respect for the women's side of the sport. They called it an egg and spoon race openly. Now, with the new generation of riders in the sport, there's a whole lot more respect for women's mountain biking.
Okay. Competitions were the big thing for you for the next 4 years of your life. You were spent a lot of time on the road competing. You're almost always in the top 10. You're on the podium a lot. And in terms of being a competitive person, are you one of those people that goes to these races and really wants to win? Do you have that competitive edge?
I mean, naturally, I don't have that super gnarly competitive edge. I am a little bit competitive, but I wouldn't say winning is in my blood. Like, I don't have that.
You don't cry when you lose?
No, I'm kind of just stoked for everyone that had a good time and everyone's safe and happy. For me, it was always an experiment, the racing thing, and it was always a stepping stone to do more of the stuff I wanted to do.
I would think in that world, a lot of it is mental. You have all the traveling, living out of suitcases, and having no life, but that's a given into what you do. But when you switch up your bike riding style to focus on Crankworx style events and then filming, it's a totally different vibe in your life compared to what happened for a race day. What are the big differences that you can think about now compared to your World Cup days to now in like your doing what you want days?
Well, I learned so much from World Cup racing. I think that was the really important part because I learned the mental game of mountain biking, how to overcome something that you don't think you can do to, okay, I'm going to do it and actually make it good. So that translates really well into the freeriding and the filming side of things. The one thing that's different is I have no one to compare myself to. Like, I'm not watching someone else ride down that section and be like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. You kind of got to figure it out all on your own a lot of the time. And you got to become comfortable with trusting yourself a whole lot more.
2016 is a different year from you. It's less about contests, more about events like Crankworx and filming, which I said. And I've seen this happen so much in other sports. You build a name for yourself in the contest world. You get big enough where you've validated what you can do based on your results. And now you can push your riding in the way you want to because your sponsors believe in you. They know you're going to put out great content and you can still get paid to do the cool stuff. But was the shift just like, I am sick of competing and traveling with scabs and this and that? Oh, no, you're always going to travel with scabs, I guess.
Travel with scabs is the worst.
Being in a tight van with 8 other people in scabs has got to be the worst, I would think.
Yeah, they're gross.
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate to be able to do what I want to do in the sport. And I know there's a few other girls, too, that are not racing and actually killing it on the freeride side of things. So that's super inspirational and good to see that the sport actually values people that are pushing the boundaries of a sport that doesn't yet exist for women.
Yeah, and what you're doing now, the creativity in the lines makes it look a lot more fun than something that's timed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's no event for women that's judged at Crankworx. Like, there is, but they're not, like, points rated or anything like that. So, I don't know. There needs to be more judged events, I think, and more women focusing on being styly rather than just flat-out speed. Because I think that sells the sport a lot more to people that are intimidated by racing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more cool stuff that is coming out of the free ride side than the race side. I mean, I feel like every aspect of it, when you look at a video segment, it really makes you want to do it. Whereas the race, you're just looking at how badass that person is and how fast they can go.
Yeah, and it's like, whoa, that's gnarly.
Yeah, so you're going to focus on a lot more video projects. And the one that stands out to me, and that's because I come from the ski industry, is your TGR part.
Oh, yeah.
That was fucking amazing. I went to that movie, and you dropping Corbetts was the highlight of the ski movie. I mean, that doesn't say that much for TGR that year, unfortunately, because their skiing should have been off the charts. But I walked out of there like, holy shit, that mountain biking segment was the best part of the movie, and it was insane. Do you drop that kind of shit on your skis?
Not generally. Like, sometimes I'll drop stuff on skis, but usually it's into powder, not like corn snow.
I can see your bike. I mean, it did happen where you totally endoed and flipped like 100 times. But are you guys salting the landing or?
Yeah, we salted the crap out of that landing because it was springtime, like super late in the season. And if we didn't salt it, it was just going to be right over the bars as soon as you land. So we salted the landing. And Cam tested it the day before, just like going down there and riding it on his bike. But my bike hadn't showed up yet, so I didn't get the pre-test of what the snow felt like on my bike. So I built my bike that night after watching Cam test it and built my bike up, headed up straight first thing in the morning. And my first time riding my new bike was straight off of Corbetts. Like, straight out of the box, off a jump into a couloir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first part of the jump went okay, landed it.
You stomped the shit out of it.
Yeah, I meant to, like, do a big, heavy carve into the snow. I thought it would be a lot, like, softer after the salted section. I went to carve, and my tires didn't dig in at all. So I just, like, picked up all this speed and momentum. And at that point, like, heading down the couloir, I was like, oh, this is a one-way ticket.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going way too fast to do anything right now. So, yeah, I went over the bars after hitting, like, a bump and ate crap.
And that bump that you kind of, your whole body hits, that, like, snow snake that you hit.
Yeah, runnel.
If that's dirt, that totally destroys you, but it's snow, so you only get a bloody nose, which is nice.
Yeah, I definitely hit hard, man. Like, my face hit the inside of my helmet, which never happens, which gave me the bloody nose, and I definitely rang my bell. But, yeah, if it was dirt, I probably would have been in way worse shape. I was very lucky to walk away from that.
Best segment in a ski movie. I've never seen that happen before from an outside sport. And what other projects have you put together so far that you're pretty proud of?
Definitely being in Not Too Bad, which was a movie that Trek put out the first year I was on Trek. That was probably one of the best filming experiences I've had, just because it was new team and we're all in this one big house and there's these big jumps that were freshly built. It was just like pretty much a dream come true right out of the gate into the free ride world. So yeah, it was pretty sick, like riding with all my heroes that I'd looked up to for so long. That was pretty cool being a part of that film. And then the last couple of film projects I done, one in Argentina, in Patagonia, that was a true free ride segment. There was no trails. We were just riding these gnarly scree lines all over the Patagonian mountains. And then also Hawaii was awesome. Again, lots of sweet jumps and rad crew.
And does that all come out this fall?
Yeah, this all comes out pretty soon here. Actually, June 14th it comes out.
So perfect.
Yeah.
Where would people go find this on June 14th?
The premiere is on June 14th in Vancouver at the Vogue Theatre, and it is Return to Earth, a bike film made by Anthill. Yeah, they've done a super good job on it, and I think everyone had a really good time making it.
Awesome. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but last year around September, I was sending you random Instagram messages trying to get you on the podcast.
Oh, yeah, okay.
There was an outside chance that you would be at Rampage, and I wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
You never got back to me. That's okay. We're talking now.
I'm a dickhead.
No, it's totally cool. People do it to me all the time.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about Rampage because I thought that there was a chance you were going to make it in. I think you thought there could have been a chance you made it in last year. But is Rampage on the bucket list of things that you want to accomplish this year?
I mean, the event itself, I'm not too fussed about, but I would love to be able to ride top to bottom on the Rampage course. That would be a huge success for me, and that's definitely on my bucket list.
This year you were a digger. Is that a tactic at all, like showing that you know that you need to do this to earn your way and build respect, and it all starts with digging?
Yeah, definitely part of it. From what I've seen, a lot of the Rampage riders nowadays used to be diggers, and that's kind of the path you gotta take. Digging was a really cool experience, just to see the event from a very intimate level, up close, and seeing what the riders go through and how the land transforms as well, because we had a new site this year, so it was a lot of work, like way more work than the previous years, because you're dealing with just raw land. You're not dealing with anyone's previous lines or anything like that. So it was crazy. Like, I was totally worked, and everyone was putting in 120% effort. It was crazy how much energy went into that mountain last year.
And how do you get yourself into the Rampage? Is there lobbying that goes on your side? How do you get a spot this year?
Well, it's different this year. Last year it was like, send in a video and we'll judge your video. So I did that, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to put anything fantastic together, but I did send in like some Rampage kind of style writing. But this year there is a Rampage qualifier event in Bend, Oregon, and it's being put together by a bunch of Rampage riders, and 21 athletes are getting invited, and I got invited to that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It'll be fun no matter what. I'm sure there'll be plenty of guys there that are way more qualified for the actual Rampage event, but I think it's a great first step for me to compete in something like that. I'm excited for it.
Awesome. Are there any other women that you think are ready for Rampage?
Yeah, I actually sent in Veronique Sandler's email and phone number to the organizer, because I was like, she needs to be there because she's really good. And I think she can definitely hold her own in an event like that. So yeah, I'm excited if she comes.
And if you get in, it's a huge statement. I mean, there are not too many times that women are competing against the men. And will that put more pressure on you as you are the first woman doing it in the mountain bike world?
Yeah, that'd be insane. I mean, that seems so far-fetched for my brain right now, but I mean, yeah, I think that would be, like, just even getting the invite would be insane.
And what are your odds, you think, of getting an invite this year?
Oh, odds, hey? I don't know. They're taking 2 or 3 people from the qualifier event, so I'll have to really do well at the qualifier to make it in.
Well, I hope that happens and you blow everyone's fucking mind with that.
Thank you.
That is really it for the body of the podcast. Now I jump into something that I call inappropriate questions.
All right.
I have 3 questions for you. Sometimes I get people who know you to ask questions, but if I have the questions, I'm going to ask them to you. And I do have the questions, so I'm going to, and I will start out with my first question.
All right, shoot.
You are missing a prominent tooth.
Yes.
How did you lose it? What is the reaction from people when they see you, especially when you look dirty and you're missing that tooth? And what's the funniest thing you've ever done with your tooth?
Oh my god. So I lost my tooth when I was in New Zealand. I was eating a fig and I broke my tooth above the gum line because it was a dead tooth from previously hitting my face on my handlebars when I was 12 years old, hitting a jump. So over the years, it just gotten weaker and weaker, and yeah, obviously it broke, and it was the beginning of the World Cup season, so I didn't have time to go home and get the implant, nor did I have the $7,000 to get a new tooth either, so that was a lot of money, and so I just ran a fake tooth that the dentist made for me that was supposed to stay in for 6 months, but it only lasted like 6 hours and it broke.
Oh.
And so it was this tooth that kind of stayed in. Yeah, it was definitely a tooth that I just used to get through security at the airport so people wouldn't think I was a crackhead. And then I ran that tooth for a year during the World Cup season, and I would rarely have it in because it was just so awkward and uncomfortable, and I thought it was a sweet party trick just not to have a tooth for a certain amount of time.
I think it's amazing.
It was great. It was funny as hell, and I'm glad I had that time to play tricks on people. And then I was about to go to this big trade show in Germany, and I was having a shower, and I had my fake tooth in 2 days before this trade show, and it was big, like, last year contract, so I was ready to renegotiate all my new contracts with all these big sponsors and stuff. And I was having a shower, and you know when you open your mouth in the shower and you, like, have the water run into your mouth?
Yeah.
Well, I did that, and the shower was strong enough to bust my tooth out of my mouth and wash it right down the drain. So I lost my fake tooth right before this trade show. And I was like, oh no, how am I going to renegotiate contracts without a tooth? How am I going to earn any respect for this?
I feel like you get more money that way. It's like, hey, I can't even pay for my tooth.
Yeah, look at the state I'm in.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was in Lake Garda, and I found a dentist, and I begged him, and he said, impossible, not possible, it's not going to happen, we're not going to give you a tooth. He didn't speak a word of English, and I just, like, kept knocking on his door. I'm like, I need you to build me a fake tooth, like, now. So he eventually caved and built me a fake tooth in, like, 20 minutes, and glued it into my mouth, and I went to the trade show, and everything went great. That was my last year on Bergamot, and I got on to Trek that year. Nothing worked out at the trade show. I didn't get any deals from that, but just being there and letting the bike world know that I was ready for a change was great.
And I should ask you right now, who pays you to bike?
Trek is my bike sponsor. Cliff Bar is my bar sponsor, and they have my helmet space, so I wear a Cliff Bar helmet, and Bell Bike helmets, SRAM, and Dakine clothing.
Awesome. I figure we should get that out there. So now I'm going to go with inappropriate question number 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've always thought that men are pigs. And, you know, if you look at the world today and the stories you hear and read, men are way bigger pigs than I ever thought or believed. And where am I going with this question? You are a woman. You're on social media, and pretty much everyone can reach out to you. Do you get some messed up direct messages from random men?
I feel like I'm pretty lucky in that way. I deleted Facebook because I felt like on Facebook I was getting a lot more weird messages and stuff, but Instagram I've been pretty safe. I think there is a area of Instagram that I don't go to where they kind of filter out all the weird stuff for me, but I rarely ever get a weird message. I have had a stalker before though, which is not good.
How bad of a stalker?
Like finds out where you live and comes into your house kind of stalker.
Oh, Jesus.
But the craziest thing is it wasn't a dude.
No way.
Really?
That's insane.
For real.
Just as scary though, I would think.
Yeah, it was a young Chinese girl that was like fresh off the boat.
Just wanted to cut you in little pieces? Sorry, that's not funny.
Yeah, she had a future for me, for sure.
Do you get her taken care of?
Yeah,
Good.
I definitely called the cops.
Good. That's scary.
Yeah.
All right, my final inappropriate question. You post a lot of pictures with Brett Reeder on the internet. It looks like you guys are dating, but I don't know if you're dating. Was it love at first bike? What's going on there?
I mean, we've known each other for years, being kind of on the same team. We see each other at events and stuff, and yeah, I mean, 7-8 months ago, it was just like, you're pretty cool.
Has anyone used the L word yet?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah, so he's a big inspiration for me too.
Well, that's your boyfriend, I guess. It's official.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I hope you're red in the face right now.
I am.
Good. And I look forward to your projects that are coming out, but I really want to see you in Virgin, Utah at Rampage in October, because I'm going to go again because it's the craziest event I've ever been to in my life, and I hope to see you there on your bike.
Hey, I'll be there whether or not I'm invited to the event, so yeah, I'll show up.
So that was time with Casey Brown, and based on how she lived her early life, I'm really surprised with how outgoing she was. I wasn't expecting a hermit by any means, but I did think she would be a little bit more guarded, but she wasn't at all. I mean, to me, her life sucked until she was 12 years old, and those first 12 years are pretty important for a kid's development. But it was like once she made that tough decision to not return to her mom in New Zealand, life really started for Casey. It was a really tough call for a kid to make, and then things started settling down in life. But then she had to deal with the loss of her brother. Casey had so much shit to get through before she could really start focusing on herself. And then she made it all happen. Now she's in a phase of her career where she can pick and choose what she wants to do on her bike. And the one thing she really wants to do is Rampage, and that's not her choice. She can earn it, and it will be interesting to see what happens at the Rampage qualifier in Bend. That's the show for this week. I want to thank you for listening. If you have any feedback for me, send me an email. You can reach me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I will get back to you. And finally, I want to thank the folks who make this show happen. They are Evo, Spy, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.